Hey kids, today we are going to work our way through the first part of the lottery and I'm going to kind of talk you through the annotation process and here we go. So before we get started actually reading this short piece, I want you to take a look at a couple of things. Number one, it was written in 1948. So as we look at that year, we think back in history, World War II has just ended. Um, we're kind of just in a time period of rebuilding. And then what I want for you to do first is when someone says the lottery, above the word lottery or around the word lottery, I want for you to start thinking of a few different things that come to your mind when you hear lottery. So I'm going to give you just a minute. Go ahead and jot down a couple of ideas like, um, hmm, well, it's often with winning. So I'm going to write down winning something because like I'm thinking of the lottery like a Powerball drawing, or like tickets for something, like you get your name put into like a raffle. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. See if you can get at least 3 or 4 different things that come to mind when you think of lottery. I'm going to work for another few seconds and then, yeah, we'll see what you come up with. I think money, lottery, winning, Powerball tickets. Well, often there's a lot of people. Okay. Did you get some ideas down? All right, so we'll keep those in mind as we work our way through. We are going to start reading aloud. Shirley Jackson is a master in this piece of doing a couple of reading strategies or writer strategies that we will pick up on as readers. One, she does a lot with repetition. So as we read, I want for you to look for words that you continue to see throughout the piece. She also uses color and she uses something called juxtaposition, where she'll take 2 opposite ideas and kind of include them or nest them next to each other. And so as we go, I'll be annotating. I want you to annotate with me. And I want for you to pay attention to those things as we go, and I'll draw attention as well. So these first few pages have really big paragraphs. And so the reading strategy that we're going to use on top of looking for that repetition and color and juxtapositioning is out on the side, we're kind of going to just jot a couple of notes of what it is that's happening in this paragraph. So here we go. The morning of June 27th was clear and sunny, with the fresh warmth of a full summer day. The flowers were blossoming profusely. What a cool word. And the grass was richly green. The people of the village began to gather in the square between the post office and the bank around 10 o'clock. In some towns, there's more than one town, there were so many people that the lottery took 2 days and had to be started on June 2nd. June 2nd. I wonder if that's okay. But in this village, where there were only about 300 people, the whole lottery took less than 2 hours. So it could begin at 10 o'clock in the morning and still be through in time to allow the villagers to get home for noon dinner. Okay, so this paragraph is basically setting us up that it's summer, there's a lottery taking place. We're kind of just getting ourselves acclimated to what is happening in this story. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue to the next paragraph. The children assembled first, of course. School was recently over for the summer. Well, I'm used to that. And the feeling of liberty sat uneasily on most of them. Feeling of liberty, so like freedom. So the kids maybe weren't used to being free from school. So they tended to gather together quietly for a while before they broke into boisterous play, and their talk was still of the classroom and the teacher, of books and reprimands. Bobby Martin had already stuffed his pockets full of stones, and the other boys soon followed his example, selecting the smoothest and roundest stones. Okay, so I'm starting to see the word stone. So I'm going to go ahead and circle that. I don't know if it means anything, but 2 times in a single sentence makes me wonder. Bobby and Harry Jones and Dickie Delacroix, the villagers pronounced his name Delacroix, eventually made a great pile of stones. There it is again. They made a great pile of stones in one corner of the square and guarded it against the raids of the other boys. The girls stood aside, talking among themselves, looking over their shoulders at rolled in the dust, I think that's a typo, or clung to the hands of their older brothers and sisters. So So we're sitting and we're looking at this place. We have the kids. The boys they're getting stones. And the girls, they seem to just be standing around and talking. So I'm going to go ahead and jot that on the paragraph. Okay, you ready? Did you get some notes written down? I'm going to give you just a second to go ahead and make sure that you're in the right spot for both of those. Notice too that I decided to switch colors. Like I kind of like to use colors when I'm looking for different things because it helps me visually see what's happening. So, okay, let's scoot this down just a little bit. All right, and so we continue. Soon the men began to gather, surveying their children, speaking of planting and rain, tractors and taxes. They stood together away from the pile of stones. There it is again, stones again. It's weird. Okay. Away from the pile of stones in the corner, and their jokes were quiet, and they smiled rather than laughed. Smiled rather than laughed. Wonder if it's the topic or I don't know. The women, wearing faded house dresses and sweaters, came shortly after their menfolk. They greeted one another and exchanged bits of gossip as they went to join their husbands. Soon the women standing by their husbands began to call to their children, and the children came reluctantly, having to be called 4 or 5 times. Bobby Martin ducked under his mother's grasping hand and ran, laughing back to the pile of stones. Stones again. Let's circle it. His father spoke up sharply, and Bobby came quickly and took his place between his father and his oldest brother. Okay, so same thing with this one. So the last paragraph was about what the boys and the girls, the children are doing in the square. And now we're talking about the men and the women. And so the men, they're just chatting. And the women, they're like gathering the children, it looks like, and talking. So they're talking. They're all just kind of standing around. Seems like the men are just talking about regular old things on this day. So, okay, so I'll give you a second to jot that down, and then we're going to continue. Okay, are we ready? Here we go. The lottery was conducted, as were the square dances, the teen club, the Halloween program, by Mr. Summers, who had time and energy to devote to civic activities. A civic activity is like what's happening in the community. So we got Mr. Summers. All right. He was a round-faced, jovial man, and he ran the coal business, and people were sorry for him. Sorry for him, because he had no children and his wife was a scold. That's an interesting term. I think it's interesting. So this would be a first example of that juxtapositioning that I kind of mentioned. Mr. Summers, and when we think of summer, we're like bright and cheery and pretty colors. And then he ran the coal business. And when we think of coal, it's not bright and cheery and summery. Coal is, of course, black. And so we're getting into these darker colors. I wonder if that means anything, maybe not. I don't know. And people were sorry for him because he had no children and his wife was a scold. When he arrived in the square carrying the black wooden box, wait a minute. So we just talked about coal, and that's black. And then now he also has a black wooden box. I think I'm going to circle that in case it means something. I don't know if it's coming back. I'm going to use the same color that I used for coal because both of them are black. And I wonder if, okay, let's keep going. There was a murmur of conversation among the villagers, and he waved and called, "Little late today, folks." The postmaster, Mr. Graves. Look at that name, Graves. Think of what graves are usually associated with, too. Because everything's intentional when a writer's doing that. So let's just put a star by his name. Let's see if that matters. Mr. Graves followed him, carrying a 3-legged stool, and the stool was put in the center of the square, and Mr. Summers set the black box down on it. There's that black again. The villagers kept their distance from a box? Doesn't that seem weird? They kept their distance from a box. I mean, I guess the only reason, like, if you're keeping your distance from something, it's usually something you're uncomfortable with. So, I wonder what the box might represent. Let's check here. So let's keep going. The villagers kept their distance, leaving a space between themselves and the stool, and when Mr. Summers said, "Some of you fellows want to give me a hand?" there was a hesitation before two men, Mr. Martin and his oldest son Baxter, came forward to hold the box steady on the stool while Mr. Summers stirred up the papers inside of it. So not only did they not, like, they're moving away from this box, but like they don't even want to help move the box. So I'm sensing as a reader, there's some uncomfort associated with this box. So I'm going to jot uncomfortable about box. I don't know. And then really what's happening here is they're getting set up for something. I mean, we know that we're getting set up for the lottery, but I don't really know what that means. Set up for lottery. Okay. I'm going to give you just a second. I think we're going to get one more paragraph done here in just a minute. Hopefully your reader brain is starting to go right now and you're like, lots of black. We got Mr. Summers and Mr. Graves, and that's kind of almost another juxtaposition because Summer and Graves, like one's happier and one's not. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, shall we? The original paraphernalia is like the stuff. So all of the things like robes or gavels and all that kind of stuff, the stuff that's associated with doing something. So like for a birthday party, it might be the balloons and the cake and the presents and things like that. The original paraphernalia for the lottery had been lost long ago, and the black box, what color did I use for black? And the black box, now resting on the stool, had been put into use even before Old Man Warner, the oldest man in town, was born. Mr. Summers spoke frequently to the villagers about making a new box, but no one liked to upset even as much tradition as was represented by the black box. So they don't want a new one because of tradition. Okay. There was a story. Here, let's put that down. No new box because it's a tradition. And are all traditions good? I don't know. I think it's up for debate. There was a story that the present box had been made with some pieces of the box that had preceded it, the one that had been constructed when the first people settled down to make a village here. Every year after the lottery, Mr. Summers began talking again about a new box, but every year the subject was allowed to fade off without anything being done. The black box, there it is again. Okay, the black box grew shabbier each year, yuckier. Each year, by now it was no longer completely black, there it is again, but splintered badly along one side to show the original wood color and in some places faded or stained. So if I'm thinking about that in this box, he always talks about making a new one, but they never do. So I wonder how often it's actually used, because if you need something new, you're going to get one. So, it's shabbier every year. They talk about making a new one right after the lottery, but then it never happens. So, okay, so we've read the first few paragraphs. That's your first video, and we will be back with your next paragraphs.